I'd like to welcome you back to another message from the wilderness. My message today touches on the importance of higher education in America. When I first began teaching college classes over 30 years ago, I taught my students about two kinds of learning, cumulative and metamorphic. We're all familiar with cumulative learning, where we add more pages to our personal knowledge books. Cumulative learning is essential in many fields and highly valuable. On the other hand, we can also be engaged in metamorphic learning, where we are not just adding pages to what we already know. We might be tearing out some pages, rewriting others, and adding pages in various locations to our personal knowledge books. I could compare lessons about learning to the rocks here in Jay Cooke State Park in northern Minnesota. The rocks you see are metamorphic, mostly slate and greywacke. They've been recrystallized from glacial lakebed sediments over millions of years by intense heat and pressure. The accumulation of sediments over time is like cumulative learning. With cumulative learning, nothing is replaced, only added upon. As useful as it may be, it's not a formula for resilience. Sediments can even be muddy for a long time until the layers gradually harden into something more durable. Even after they harden, sediments are almost always weak. Metamorphic rocks, like the ones we see here, are much more durable, more resistant to the forces of erosion. Civilizations are like these rocks. All civilizations depend on what they understand. For civilizations to endure, they need understanding that has developed from metamorphic processes. Metamorphic understanding comes from ideas that are challenged by other ideas repeatedly. Understanding is then reshaped and strengthened until it has the capacity to resist all kinds of erosional forces. The original elements are maintained, but they are combined with others and recrystallized over time. America, more than any other nation in history, has long understood the need for metamorphic development. In 1944, a book published by Elizabeth Jackson titled The Faith and Fire Within Us, an American Credo, brilliantly highlighted America's need for metamorphic development. Jackson wrote, quote, "I think that educating human beings is the hardest task we can possibly set ourselves. Verily, education is the most difficult of all human endeavors, so difficult indeed that few nations have even attempted it. Is it faith or madness that makes us attempt it? And is not the very fact of the attempt one of the most astounding demonstrations of the vigor of American democracy?" End of quote. Jackson was not writing about just cumulative learning. That is easy enough for most countries to support and is not particularly astounding. She was writing about educating the citizens of America metamorphically so that we could become increasingly better versions of who we were meant to be. America is at its best when we decide to become stronger instead of retreating to places of misplaced comfort. No publicly supported institution in the U.S. helps us stay on this course better than does higher education. Higher education, when it is done fully, aims to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. It's all about creative and critical thinking in an environment of open communication. Higher education has always had critics, even enemies, who would rather stay comfortable. Jackson wrote as World War II was raging, quote, "One section of America opinion nowadays, quite powerful and quite vocal, believes that education should go only so far and stop, just short of any kind of intellectual inquiry into ideas. There are people today who are scared of new ideas about economics and politics, just as 16th century conservatives were scared of the dangerous ideas found in the Bible. These people want the schools to teach English and science and mathematics, but not ideas. They even finance active campaigns to prevent education from getting to the point where it encourages children to ask questions. If this group of people ever got complete control of the schools, they would produce the kind of education that made Prussianism and Nazism possible. Hitler could never have come into power except in a nation of great intellectual docility. End of quote. Intellectual docility is when we decide cumulative learning alone is all we need. Champions of education think otherwise. They know that we need education of ideas, especially when social pressures are intense. Jackson wrote to this as well, quote, "We have learned to fear a scholarship that denies the existence of truth, and an education that seeks not intelligence, but uniformity. If there is one thing in the wide world that is un-American, this is it." End of quote. I could not agree more. Learning that is satisfied with just protecting uniformity is not going to make us a great nation. This approach, if followed long enough, will in fact be the end of the American experiment in self-governance. In a book titled The Collapse of Complex Societies, written by Joseph A. Tainter, first published in 1988, we read, quote, "A complex society that has collapsed is suddenly smaller, simpler, less stratified, and less socially differentiated. Specialization decreases, and there is less centralized control. The flow of information drops. People trade and interact less, and there is overall lower coordination among individuals and groups. Economic activity drops to a commensurate level, while the arts and literature experience such a quantitative decline that a dark ages often ensues." End of quote. This description of civilizations that gave up on a diverse, progressive society resonates all too much in contemporary times. I think of a poem I memorized decades ago by Edwin Markham. "We are all blind until we see that in the human plan nothing is worth the making if it does not make the man. Why build these cities glorious if man unbuilded goes? In vain we build the world unless the builder also grows. No, cumulative learning is not enough. We need metamorphic development that builds the builders, or all our cumulative learning skills do not matter much." This brings me to the Harvard University issue. The Trump administration's attempt to restrict international students from enrolling or even continuing to attend is a movement away from metamorphic development. The attempt would devastate thousands of international students, many of whom have not been at all involved in protesting the horrific October 7th, 2023 attack Hamas levied on innocent Israelis, and the subsequent Israeli response, which has also been catastrophic. I cannot recommend any policy approach to the tragic situation in Gaza. What I will say is that it is a mistake to think we can find our way to a better place by relying only on what we already know, rather than being open to new ideas that may illuminate better options. We need the voices of international students to help us become more capable Americans. This is the American way. Our founders hoped we would progress both by being true to the principles of American democracy while embracing new partnerships and new ways of approaching issues. The current president of Harvard, Alan M. Garber, who is Jewish, wrote, quote, "Harvard's pursuit of excellence in teaching, learning, research, and service to the world is vastly enriched by our international community. By welcoming diverse expertise and perspectives to campus, we understand the world in new ways and more effectively address its most pressing challenges." End of quote. U.S. Department of State official Scott Weinhold concurred. Quote, "The ties formed between U.S. and international students today are the basis of relationships for future business and trade, science and innovation, and government relations. End of quote. I admire these sentiments. They honor a vision of America that is unafraid of progress. Why would we want to end one of the best mechanisms we have to make us more resilient as a nation? A more perfect union is one willing to progress. On the other hand, a more fragile union is one that demands uniformity above all else, adding more layers, but not becoming stronger in the process. These are lessons I learned from Rivers and Rocks. Until next time, I want to wish you all the best from the wilderness.